and thank you all for attending this webinar and taking 45 minutes or so of your time for hearing about this topic. As Dr. Misters just said, I am a medical doctor, and so some of you might be wondering why a medical doctor would be talking to you this afternoon. This is a very important topic, has been a very important topic and a matter of debate in the editorial and scientific community since the last few years. And this afternoon, I'm very grateful to the editor of the Journal of Applied Bioanalysis, Dr. Misters, for giving us the opportunity to present what, as our small company Reviewer Credits, we have tried to do over the last 2.5 years. I also would like to introduce briefly our company. We are a very small company coming from the University of Milan Bicocca. We are in fact a spin-off of the University of Milan Bicocca. Why are we discussing this afternoon about the recognition of peer review and how, and you will see why specifically we are hosted by the Journal of Applied Bioanalysis this afternoon. So I imagine that most of you who are present at who are attending this webinar are somehow involved in the field of publishing, not necessarily medical publishing, but in all the, I would say, both scientific and social sciences. Peer review is really the cornerstone of good science publication. So if anybody of you hasn't heard about the process of peer review, I really find hard sometimes talking to my friends, explaining them what peer review is and how the system works. Someone finds it a bit awkward, but anyway, the peer review is basically the process by which the work of an author, which is submitted to a journal, to a scientific journal, he is reviewed and judged by other experts in the same field. And really the process of peer review is aimed to help the journal editor, who eventually has to make the decision on what the destiny of the paper should be, so whether the paper should be accepted or requires modification or requires or should be rejected, what the process of what the destiny of the paper should be. So the peer reviewer, if you wish, is a sort of consultant for the journal, who eventually has the responsibility to take the decision of publishing or rejecting the paper. The term peer reflects the fact that theoretically we should have our manuscript reviewed by someone who is a peer to us, so who has more or less the same experience, who has more or less the same position, and so that is in a fair position to judge the quality of our work. And indeed, the process of peer evolved since many years. I am learning a lot about peer reviews after I embarked myself in this experience of reviewer credits, and there are beautiful talks. If you wish to read them, there are nice talks and paper authored by, for example, Flaminio Squazzoni, who's an Italian social scientist working in the field of peer review, that describes the history of peer review since the very beginning on the Royal Academic Society in the UK up to the current days. But basically the models of peer reviews that currently we rely on are I would say the traditional one, the classical one, which is the double-blind peer review, in which the authors and the reviewers are both blind to their respective names. It is really hard to keep the anonymity of the authors. Of course, it's possible to delete the names from the paper, to remove the names from the paper, but you know, in the scientific world, it's really, I would say, it's not that difficult to establish who is the author of the paper, or at least the group, even without knowing the names. But anyway, this is a commonly used model. And then there is the model which I personally, as a medical doctor, am more familiar with, which is the single blind model, in which the reviewer knows the names of the authors, but the authors do not know the name of the peer reviewer. And this model has changed, I would say, over the last 10, 15 years to open peer review process, in which either the reviewers are invited to sign their peer review, so they have the option of letting the authors know their names, or the peer review is the name of the peer reviewers is made public from the very beginning. So once the peer reviewer received the invitation, she or he already knows that the name, her or his name, will be made public, and up to the point that some journals do publish also the entire peer review, the entire comments that the peer reviewers gave. And in this review of a public are experimenting other forms of peer review, such as the post-publication peer review, in which basically the authors, the paper remains online, open for further comments by the scientific community. So I think the landscape of peer review is changing. It is changing the way we look at peer review in the as I will explain you in the next slides. We asked you, okay, I'm just moving my slide. When we looked review model, that because I got a message that the voice was not. Anyway, so I think it's very important when we consider accepting an invitation to peer review a manuscript to have the goal in mind. So in my opinion, what makes a good reviewer is the fact that that this reviewer is able to keep the real goal of peer review in mind. And so I think there are some common misunderstanding on peer review, so that sort of the peer reviewer should not, I think, be looking for what is wrong in the paper, to find all possible sources of let's say, small mistakes, and try somehow to challenge the authors to show that they neglected something. Although, on the other hand, the real goal of peer review should be the improvement of the manuscripts that get published, and the publication of good science. So I think good peer reviewers are those who really work to improve the quality of the paper and to provide a fair suggestion to the editor. I think it's also important to keep in mind that reviewers act as referees and act as consultants to the journal's editor, rather than having to take the decision themselves whether the paper should be published or not. And I think this I can skip. I think that a good review starts from the same, has the same logical process that has the publication of a paper. So when I peer review, and you know, this is my personal experience, and it's also what the common educational material for peer review suggests, is to really start by looking at the question that the authors of the paper posed, and to see first of all, if the question is sound and clear, if it has a rationale, and if it is original. So of course, peer reviewing means that the peer reviewer will have to check for the literature to make sure she or he is updated with the literature and knows what has been published in the field, or otherwise goes and look for it, because clearly the originality of the paper or the declaration of previous paper that focus on the same topic is crucial for the quality of the science which is published. And then we move on from the introduction to what is called methods, or materials and methods, or patients and methods, depends from the field you're working in. In our papers, these are normally called patients and methods. But anyway, are these adequate to answer the question that the authors had posed? Are they logically linked to the question that the authors were trying to answer? And also, we should all be in the position of reproducing any experiment or any study which is published, at least theoretically, and so the methods should be clearly and well and exhaustively described. And as we move on to the results section, sometimes there are plenty of results put in the results section, plenty of graphs, plenty of plots. But the real question is, are these results really answering or tackling the original question that the authors posed, and are these clearly and logically presented in a way that that reader can interpret? And of course, then results need a proper discussion. And so the discussion, I think it's the hardest part to judge of a paper. Reviewers normally focus on the methods and results, and it makes good sense. And then the discussion is oftentimes read through rather quickly. But of course, it's important to verify that the limitations of the paper are properly recognized and acknowledged, and that previous papers are correctly taken into consideration, discussed. And finally, the conclusion is the most important part. Once I heard that many readers do not even read the paper, do not even read the abstract, they just read the conclusions of the abstract. So I think this is not exactly the best way to go, but you know, sometimes you do not have time, and so we need to make sure that what we have stated in a discussion and in the conclusion especially is exactly reflecting what the results of the papers were. And I mean, of course, we could have an entire webinar on the ethics of peer review, but clearly, I think we have to keep in mind that the peer reviewer has a crucial role in assessing the quality of the paper that then will be published, and that might affect, for example, the health of several thousand people who will be exposed to a given drug after a paper has been published. So really, the role of the peer reviewer is crucial into this, and there are some ethical principles that are, I would say, that should absolutely be adhered to. So I think in the field of peer review, the largest ethical issues arise from the conflicts of interest, and these are of two types, I would say. There are personal conflicts of interest. It's a small world, and we oftentimes know the authors of the papers that we review. Editors should normally avoid these kind of conflicts, but as we will see in the next slides, it's not that easy for editors to find peer reviewers, and so oftentimes they will have to invite someone who has been a co-author or a collaborator of the authors of the paper. And so some personal conflict of interest is oftentimes unavoidable. I think it's very important to just state these conflicts of interest to the editor, who eventually will decide whether we are the right reviewer for that paper, saying we should be aware I have published with this author many papers, we have a collaboration ongoing, and always try not to, if you are in a single or double blind system, not to disclose your identity to your colleagues for the good or for the bad. I'm reviewing your paper, or even after, that paper you published, I was a reviewer. The blindness has the purpose of protecting us from potential conflicts of interest. There is a more subtle conflict of interest, which is the scientific conflict of interest, meaning that we might be working on the same area of the paper which is being published, which is being submitted, and so there could be some concurrence between us and the authors. The peer reviewer should really be competent to evaluate the paper which she or he received, and so we have to be very open to the journal's editor and let her or him know whether we feel like we can or we cannot review a paper. And finally, there is, I would say, a rather unpleasant use of some reviewers who ask, please quote this paper, or quote this paper, just to have a paper from the peer reviewer quoted. And I think this should be really discouraged, and suggestion to quote a given paper should be made on the basis of, again, the importance of that specific paper for the research in the context. And so finally, we all know that peer review is really demanding. It requires several hours to peer review a paper. It can require up to, let's say, 6 hours on average from the field I work in, which is clinical medicine, but even more for engineering, maths, or biological sciences. So there are many, many hours we spend peer reviewing manuscripts. And okay, I can skip through this. And so clearly, once we receive an invitation to peer review a manuscript, we are left with the decision of accepting it or not. Other authors, other scientists have peer reviewed our papers, and so we feel like we also should be available to review the papers from other scientists, and this is very generous, and indeed it is what motivates most of us to do peer review. But at the same time, we know that the hours in a day are 24, 7 days a week. We have a given amount of time that we have to devote to our activities, being it research, teaching, writing, administrative, and so forth. And so a large benefit of the peer review goes to the journals that can publish good science, but all the metrics that quantify the scientific production of individuals do not take into account the time spent peer reviewing. At the same time, we all know that for scientists in any field, metrics are really important. We are based on the amount of paper we publish. We are based on the number of citations we obtain, on the H index, call it whatever you want, but basically we are measured on our scientific productivity to proceed in our career, to gain visibility, to obtain funds. You are always asked how much did you publish, and based on this you will get or not a given grant, but you're never asked how much did you peer review. But that is time you will not use to write your own paper, write your own grants. And at the same time, this is true also for institutions. Institutions receive money based on the scientific productivity of their scientists, and of course, they pay their scientists to do research, but in this time, the scientists are also doing some peer review. This is also a struggle. Sorry, I'm just skipping a couple of slides. This is also a struggle for journal, and we have here an editor for a journal who can certainly confirm that finding peer reviewers is not easy, sorry. You normally send out 10 invitations to get 2 to 3 answers, and then one of these reviewers will, yes, you can, okay, Roland says, yes, I can. And then out of these 3 peer reviewers, 1 you will have to chase, and finally you will not get the peer review done. So this delays the publication process, and overall the process is very inefficient. There have been articles retracted for fraud during peer review process because there were fake peer reviewers who were the authors themselves, who suggested a colleague who finally was not a colleague but was the same person. And finally, we have the emerging problem of predatory journals and publishers who pretend to have a peer review process in place, but who really do not do any peer review. So we started a few years ago with my friend and colleague that you will see in the next slide, starting from the idea that journals, reviewers, and institutions would all benefit from an efficient and effective system to reward peer reviewers. And so we started with a very bottom-up approach. Myself and my colleague, who's also an associate professor here and a medical doctor here at Milan Bicocca University, maybe we were a bit naive. We had no experience on, we had just the experience of publishing and peer reviewing ourselves, but we never worked in a publishing company or in a journal. But we decided to start this adventure of reviewer credits, starting from having this vision in mind that the recognition of the work of peer reviewers would address an unsolved issue, increasing the accuracy of the process, that peer reviewers should become part of the individual metric exactly like it is publishing, and then finally that one of the reasons for which that if the availability of the peer reviewers would increase, then the journals and the editors would be able to select the best peer reviewers, not just those who answer the email, but the best peer reviewers, and be in the position of receiving a bad report and not inviting the same peer review any longer. So this was the idea that we should find a way to reward and support the activity of peer reviewers. And so this is where we started. How does reviewer credit work? We are in the middle of a transition, and I will show you in a minute. So basically, every scientist can open a free profile on our website, and journals can open profiles too. And basically, a scientist will log in our website for free, declare the completion of a peer review, and this information is verified with the journal because, of course, in a single blind model or in a double blind model, this information is normally confidential. And so once the journal's editor confirms this information, the reviewer receives a record in our website that says, okay, Dr. Bellani has peer reviewed a paper for intensive care medicine in the given year. So after the peer review performs the peer review, fills what we call a claim in our website, takes 2 minutes. This information is verified with an email to the editor, and the editor has to say, yes, this is true, or no, this is not correct, this peer review was never performed, and it has happened more than once. And then the reviewer receives some credits. I will get to the system of the credits in a minute. And this is basically what you get. You get a PDF certificate of your peer review activity. Nowadays, we all state in our CV, peer reviewer for the following journal, blah, blah, blah. We put a list, but it doesn't really mean anything. How many papers I have peer reviewed and another colleague has peer reviewed. It's just a very generic statement. And we provide a very clear certificate with all these informations. But then, along with the, I will, sorry, skip to this, and because I want to show you the credit system, and then I will go back. But then, along with this reviewer index, we call it, it's an indicator of the peer review activity of the individuals. We also devised a system of credits. What are the credits? The credits are exactly what the word says, are credits that the reviewers get and accumulate in our website based on the amount of peer review that they complete. And if a journal has a profile on our website, this will lead to an increased number of credits. And we started from the very idea that reviewers should get something in return to their effort. And so these credits are convertible in something tangible, in some tangible rewards. And for example, just to show you the idea, and I have to thank once again Dr. Misters, who was one of the first and most enthusiastic believers in this idea. Journals are, for example, offering discounts on the article processing charges in exchange for this credit. So this will engage a virtuous system. This will engage a virtuous system by which reviewers give something to journals, to the scientific community, and get something in return. This is one example. If you go on the website, you accumulate some credits. I personally have 410, but it takes a while to get some. You can decide to spend 30 credits to get a 30% discount on article processing charge for the Journal of Applied Bioanalysis. This is one example. Other journals, Journal of Applied Bioanalysis has a gold open access system, so you will not pay for the paper anyway, but if a journal has a fee to access the papers, you could have a discount on a paper download fee, or a discount for a scientific conference, or for example for services offering improvement in the manuscript. So the idea is to close the circle of peer reviewers giving and finally having something back for their efforts. In terms of what we would like to achieve in the future, we currently have a system which is very robust in terms of verification of the information. We verify each single declaration from peer reviewers. We do not rely on thank you emails. We just want to verify this information. And so we contact the editor for each single peer review that is declared on our website. Clearly, this system imposes some additional workload on the authors and on the editors as well. And so we are now able to receive data directly from the manuscript management platform. For example, we have a plugin for the OJS system, and all the journals that use OJS system are able to use our free plugin to stream directly the data to our services. But of course, through our API, we are able to receive data also from other platforms of different brands and manufacturers. The second issue is the fact that we, of course, know that quality does not that quantity does not equate to quality. So the fact that some reviewers review many papers does not necessarily mean that the quality is very, very high. We wanted to start from something simple, and from not accounting peer reviews at all, at least we account the number of peer reviews. But of course, an important perspective we have in the future is to be able to rank and to rate the quality of the peer reviewers, the peer reviews that have been done. And there is, for those of you who are interested, this is a very nice and interesting paper by chance three Italian authors, but it's not because they're Italian. It's a very nice paper that is proposing an index based on three parameters: the length of the peer review, the time of completion, and the collimation with the final editor decision, that could help to give a, I would say, an objective evaluation of the quality of the peer review. And this is the direction we would like to go once we have our system in place. I would just like to go back a few slides just to, I skipped the slide journals. Sometimes we are asked how do we protect our database from predatory publishers, and the short answer is that every journal can open a profile on our website. As far as it has an ISSN, we are not in the position of judging who is a predatory publisher or journal or not. We just provide one very simple information. We can demonstrate, we can certify if a journal is in fact doing peer review, or if it is just pretending it is doing peer review. So if a journal wants to have its peer review process certified by a third party, this is exactly one of the goals of our platform. And for example, I very much like this think, check, submit statement that in the check phase suggests to verify if the journal is clear about the type of peer review that it uses. I think we now can provide a platform not just where the journal self-declares the type of peer review, but in fact this information can be verified. Going towards a slide, I would just like to mention in the last 2 minutes of my talk, and then I'll be silent, I promise, that final activity we would like to be accounting for is the talks given, is the activity as conference talks. How does this relate to peer review? It relates because it is also an activity which scientists do, but it's not accounted for, at least not systematically. It's very easy to know who publishes about a given topic. It's very hard to know who speaks about that topic. Or vice versa, it's very easy to know what Dr. Bellani publishes about, but it's really hard to know whether also Dr. Bellani is able to deliver a talk on this topic. And so let's say, tackle this issue, we created free database of conference talks where conference and scientists can declare, can upload the program and can declare and can populate, this database by the talks they are given, and other scientists can look into this database for free. So I think I am at the end. Just to show you the numbers, we now have about 6,500 peer reviewers registered. Almost 10,000 claims were filled in our website, and most journals respond to our requests. 75% of the claims were closed, and journal editors understand the importance of collaborating with our platform to reward their own peer reviewer. So more than 405,000 journals replied to our claims, and 250 journals, like the Journal of Applied Bioanalysis, opened a profile on our website. And in conclusion, I hope there will be some questions for you. I think that we should really consider peer review and conference talks as research products, because these are very demanding and require competence and time. And reviewer credits aims to offer an objective tool to measure this product, introducing a virtuous system by the credits which I've shown you to also reward and recompensate the peer reviewers for their time. Eventually, we hope that by this, individuals, journal, and institution will benefit and the system will improve. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Roland, for this very nice invitation. I will be more.
Dr. Bellani, thank you very much for this perfect and interesting talk. I think we still have some time left for some questions. So if anyone has a question, please use the chat tab and Dr. Bellani will answer your question.
Maybe I was too clear.
Yeah. Otherwise, I have a question. Maybe I can start with a question. Dr. Bellani, I see some hesitation of peer reviewers for peer review recognition. How is your experience with it?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, Roland. You see some hesitation?
I see that some peer reviewers, so some scientists that do peer review of scientific papers, they have some hesitation according to peer review recognition. System.
No, I think I realized that the value of peer reviewers doing when I started to work on reviewer credits, because when you're like a younger scientist, you are very excited of being invited as a peer review. You feel like you finally made it into, and then years go by and you get more and more invitation and you're less and less excited. But really this concept that the work of peer review is at the cornerstone of scientific publications, but it's totally under-recognized. It's not something that is in the mind of my colleagues, but when you talk to them and you make them realize this, they will tell you, oh yes, you're right, it's important, right? And so I think another aspect is the fact that I am very honest. Reviewers sometimes will say, okay, I'll get a certificate, and so what? so what? Once I have this certificate, what do I do with this? But this should be, I think there should be some action from, the funding agencies, for example, to really accept the work done as peer review as an indicator of scientific production. So I think one of the reasons is that the knowledge of the importance of rewarding peer reviewers is still a bit limited, but it is growing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
We have a question, if I may read it, from Sarah Cleveland. I hope it's fine. I read the name. If reviewers can submit claims for reviews at journals who do not have a profile? Yes, absolutely. We have, I would say, more than 23,000 journals in our database. So you just log in, you start typing the journal name, and in that will show up. And as I mentioned, most journals, although they do not have a profile on our website, are answering our claims. Now, what happens if a journal refuses to approve your peer review on our website? It's up to you, but basically, I have a bit of conflict of interest, but I say, okay, I won't peer review any longer for your journal. It's very simple, because if I take my time, 3 hours of my time of peer reviewing one of your papers, why shouldn't a journal take 3 seconds to click on a link? So that's my position. But the good news is the vast majority of the journal are happy to approve or disprove the claims that we receive on our website. On your website, is there somewhere where we can go to see a list of the journals participating? So yes, if you go on the website and you look for members, it will say journals. Those are the journals, like the Journal of Applied Bioanalysis, that have a profile on our website. But I would like to emphasize that overall, there is also another tab that says non-member journals, which are the journals who collaborate with us, approving the claims even without being members. So if you just go on the website and you go to members, you will find the list of the individuals who have a profile, of the journals who have a profile, and of the journals who collaborate with us without having a profile. So I apologize if I missed the point where you addressed this, what you take on financial rewards for peer reviews. So for time being, there is no cash flow through our website. So I'm very open to this. We hello, I'm here. We do not receive any money from either the individuals or the journals that are offering benefits on our website. So if a journal comes to us and says, I would like to offer a 30% APC discount on to your members, or a conference comes to us and says, hey, I would like to increase the visibility of my conference, I would like to offer a 20% discount of for my entrance fee to your members, it's fine. We accept it, and we are not taking any money either from the journals or from the peer reviewers. Okay, that was the answer.
Okay, that was the last question, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that some of I think that today our audience is a bit mixed. There will be perhaps some reviewers and also some journals editors, and I hope there will be a great engagement from many of you.
Okay, Dr. Blani, thank you very much for this nice, interesting webinar. And I also like to thank all the attendees that joined us during this webinar. And I would like to wish everybody a nice day. And see you next time.
Thank you so much, Roland. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.